Thanks for welcome. So in conclusion, what I'd like to say is, no, I'm just kidding. Welcome. You haven't missed a thing. Come on up. I'm inviting everybody to clump up front here because we're going to have little side conversations as we get going. But let me first say, yes. Or you can just stare at each other in silent bliss, whatever you like. But let me first say good morning and welcome everybody. My name is Kelly Cannon, and I've been talked into this presentation by Cliff and other influential people who wanted me to share a little bit about God at work, how we find God at work, how we find God at work for ourselves, how we find God at work for others. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you the very, very few points that I'm going to offer here, because I'm a huge believer that the wisdom and the experience in the room is far more than what I could offer you. So for our conversation today, and it really is going to be a conversation and a dialogue, there's going to be a lot of times where I want to understand what your ideas are, and I kind of want to just keep track of those a little bit. And then where you'd like to, I'll give you the chance to kind of talk to each other, because I think there's a little bit of brainstorming and idea generation that we could do. This topic is kind of dear to my heart, because it's something that I do try to keep in mind, and I do try to do at work. Sometimes well, sometimes not so well at all. And so you're going to hear about both of those. But at the end of the day, I think what I'd like to do is to not just have a conversation, but to get to a point in the dialogue where you feel like we're talking about a couple different ideas. And my hope and my prayer is that not just that it's a dialogue, but that there's one idea through this conversation and through input from others that you'll be able to leave and then apply at work. I don't know what that is, and that's the beauty and the wonder and the fun of what the Holy Spirit's going to do. So we'll just kind of see how it goes. Can I pray us in, and then we'll get started? So Lord, thank you for bringing us here. You know, it's not a coincidence that we're here at this place at this time. We could have been a lot of other places. And the fact that you're putting me in a position to try to give your ideas and share your ideas with everyone here is just an amazing gift. And so open our hearts and open our spirits to what you have to say for us today. And if we're open, we'll come out of here changed one way or another. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, welcome, everyone. So I appreciate and love the diversity in the dialogue today. So we're gonna leverage that as we go along. So can I dive in? Oh, and by the way, very, very casual. If you have questions, ideas, better things to say than me, feel free to say Kelly, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about this. So this is your time. This is your time. So thinking about God at work and you know, our mission and our call to love God and love others. And the questions that I really like to think about are why it's so easy at church and why is it so hard at work? And not that we, yeah. Yeah, well we're going to talk about that. So, because we've been one of those coworkers at one time too. And so not that we consciously or intentionally do it, but that idea that when we walk into work, we may be somewhat, but not all the person that we are when we walk into church or when we walk in to family. And so as I thought about this topic, one of the things that I really started to think about a little bit was the idea of work and why we work. And certainly, yes, we have to work. We need a paycheck unless anybody's got really wealthy family. If you do, I'd love to hang out with you. But for most of us, there's a really bottom line kind of sustainability, thing that we have to do here. It's not an option. It's something that we have to do. And so, but it's not just to get a paycheck. And so it led me to think about this question: what's the difference between a career and a calling? And here's where I want to start kind of the brainstorming with you, because I think these are different ideas. And I think it's important to just focus on this for a couple minutes as we start, because I think we'll get towards more granular kind of tips and tricks kind of things. But I don't want the idea of of what these things are and how they are different to go by us. So in no particular order, what comes to mind when you hear about a career? What is it? What do you define it? What does it mean? Career.
Jail. It's like something you have to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the difference.
Yeah.
A career you have to do, a calling is something you want to do.
Okay, have to do. Well, say more about that. Say more about that.
I think of a career as, sustainability, keeping the lights on it. A calling as I'm giving back. Right? Supervisor of Habitat for Humanity, right? That was more a calling than a career. Right? It was something that I did to provide value back to the community.
Right. I love that. I love that example.
Provide any value
Yeah.
back to the community.
Yeah.
Career. It's doubtful.
Well, you're a part of a contributing member of society. I'm going to say yes. Still, I'm sure we do contribute value here, but I love the language that you're using in terms of have to versus kind of giving back. Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks. What else? How else would you differentiate them?
Well, one thing is I can choose my career, but the calling's really from God. I can't choose my calling. He does.
Like I could choose my friends, but not my family.
Yeah, exactly. God chose my family, and I'm just saying, come on.
That's awesome. And isn't that funny? It's for these choices. These choices we feel pretty confident about. But these choices right here, it's funny we do that. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure? Good. Great distinction. Anything else come to mind? Yep. And can say a little bit more about that. Like why? Because I agree with you, and that definitely resonates with me. Why do we tend to be more passionate about this?
I think it's because it might be your inner core. And I mean, in my previous life, I was a pharmacist. And in some ways, I decided to be a pharmacist when I was in 6th grade. So in some ways, it was a calling for me. And I did help a lot of people until my career got in the way of me really helping people in a different way. It's changed to a professional volunteer. And I really did help a lot of people in my career.
Yeah.
But it's a different way that I'm helping people now, and it's more of a passion.
Awesome. That's great. And what I'm hearing in your example is that it sounds like something that you knew for a while. It wasn't just kind of like out of the blue. Maybe it can be, but it's something that really was a story that resonated with you. So great examples here, and thank you for that. I just wanted to dwell here for a second because I do think it's important about how we think about these things, and maybe I wonder for most of us we're kind of somewhere in the middle here. But I think what we're going to talk about this morning is here's what God wants us to be thinking about, and that's the mindset that God wants us to have. So let's take a look at a verse from Colossians, and this is kind of our guiding verse for today. And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through Him. And so I want to ask the question, is it just me, or is it hard to keep this in mind when you're in front of certain people at work? Does anybody else wrestle with this? Whatever you do, not for a couple things, whatever you do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus. Is it hard? Is it just me, or like anybody else wrestle with kind of like?
I think especially with the word, like I usually am a pretty good doobie in terms of how I act, but words are a different thing.
Excellent, thanks. Yep.
Totally.
Yeah.
Wrestle with that.
Yeah.
I have no more to say, but yep.
Well, yeah. No, unnecessary. But I think what we're pointing out though is that when you think about, has anybody ever been in a work situation that has not been ideal? Like we're.
Is there any other work situation?
Yeah. It's the anti-calling. But yeah, I mean, we're talking about career and calling, and then there's like the kind of like the how did I end up here? Like literally, what am I doing here? Like how did I find myself here? I've definitely been in one of those jobs, and usually over the course of our careers, we've all landed in one of those situations or places where, again, we're the decision maker, but we either didn't read the brochure carefully enough, or it was just not as described, and we find ourselves wondering kind of how we got ourselves there. But I think this verse here in Colossians, it's great because it level sets us, and it says, no matter what your situation, do it all for Jesus. And so if you think about this verse, as I was kind of thinking about it and praying about it, what came to mind for me is just really understanding a little bit more about Jesus, right? So if we're supposed to do it all for Jesus, what do we want to know about Jesus, and what was really, what's the heart and the kernel of his ministry? And for me, what came to mind is the Sermon on the Mount. And we're all familiar with this voice. I'm going to read it in a second. What I'd love for you to do as you hear me say these words and as you read it is think about the phrase "at work" in this. So love your enemies at work. Pray for those who mistreat you at work. Give to everyone who asks at work. Do not judge at work. Forgive, and you will be forgiven at work. And so when you think about taking this into a work context, I don't know about for you, but for me, it's where the verse kind of comes alive. And it's where, when we're talking about the difference between a career and a calling, my spirit is drawn here to where Jesus is keeping it really simple. And Jesus didn't say at work, but I think the idea here, when you think about Colossians before that, is that this applies kind of everywhere. And so when I think about calling, this is what comes to mind for me. And super quick story, what came to mind for me as I was thinking about this and calling when I was in college and contemplating a career and somehow trying to figure out how you take your college major and will you find a career in it or will you not? I had been doing youth ministry for years and years before this, and I talked with a mentor of mine, and I was really at this point where I was just kind of spiritually and philosophically wrestling with, so I did all this college, but is that really what God wants me to do? And I was thinking in very classic and maybe simplistic terms about mission, like what's my mission supposed to be, and should I really just be giving it all up and moving to Uruguay or whatever and helping people grow crops and everything else? And I didn't know the answer to that, and my mentor said, well, there's a lot of people out in the world, and there's a lot of people at the companies that you're going to work at who are going to need to understand and know Jesus and who Jesus was. And he said, there's plenty of people, and he reassured me, he's like, there's plenty of people who are going to need to know in that mission field, in your organization, in your work mission field, that are going to be hungering and starving for the skin of Jesus and for God's skin out in the world. And so it was really reassuring to me to think about that's a role that I could play. So we've got this calling here, and then here's the even, as if that isn't challenging enough, we're also commissioned. Not commissioned sales, we're also commissioned. And so Christ says before he sends, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And so when you think about all the time when you're working at work, there's a lot of work time. It really is a place where you have the biggest opportunity to evangelize. And so that question about, thinking about if we have to do everything all in the name of Jesus, and we're thinking about, going and making disciples of everyone, it does seem to point to an evangelism opportunity. But I wonder why, for me at least, when I think about it, that's a little bit of a challenge. And I'll acknowledge I'm not the evangelism guy. And I'll share with you what my version of evangelism is a little bit later. But if we are called and we have this commission, the thing that I want to think about is think about what your workplace is like and why and what makes it difficult to live your faith at work. What your workplace is like and what makes it difficult to live your faith at work. I'd love to think about those questions for a second. And so what is our preferred, how would you guys like to talk about that? Do you want to talk about it large group? Do you want to talk about it in pairs real quick? What would you like to do? Large group. Okay, the group has spoken. So tell me about your workplace, and maybe let's just answer the questions together. About your workplace and what makes it difficult to live your faith at work. And like for me, let me give you just an example. So my workplace is a corporate setting where there's a very specific distinction between who you are as a citizen of the organization and then who you are personally. And it's not that religion or faith is frowned upon, it's just that the expectation, and I think this is like this in a lot of organizations, is just like that's yours and it can be 100% yours, but it's not necessarily something that you bring into the workplace. And so how it's introduced, how it's shared is a tricky thing. So for me, that's a challenge in terms of my workplace. How about you? What about your workplace might make it difficult to live your faith at work?
I think one of the things that makes the challenge in this business economy is we send most people home to work from home, right? So there is, the only time you're interacting with your colleagues is in a very specific meeting with an agenda, right? And it's very scripted, and so a lot of the getting to know other people sort of went away when we started going home.
Yeah.
Seems like a lot
Yeah.
of jobs are going that direction
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
where-
Yeah, I was just gonna say, that's my experience too. I've worked from home, and I've worked for the same company for like 14 years, and we actually all met recently in Colorado. And it was the first time I've met these people I've worked with in 14, some of them in 14 years, which is
Wow.
weird, right?
Wow, that's amazing.
What they look like?
I see pictures of them,
Oh,
so yeah,
alright.
they did. But it's weird to like know them so well, like by phone, and then
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
oh, I'm like hanging out with you. This is weird.
It must have been like a family reunion.
It was,
Yeah.
it was really cool. But what makes it interesting is you get to, like, I get to know them well by phone,
Mm-hmm.
but I work in an industry that's, can be very new age.
Mm.
So a lot of these people are like really into, palm reading and, like, so they're pretty ingrained in like the whole like world of yoga and all that. So it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Say that.
Can I ask?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Okay.
Do you use the old technology or new technology? Do you actually see them on your phone?
No, we use like just regular phones.
That's even better when you go new technology.
Yeah, we do WebEx, so you can, but most people shut their video off, right?
Right, because you're
Yeah.
in pajamas.
I'm in my underwear. I don't feel like putting my video on.
If only they knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm in my pajamas.
It's like the news reporter. You have the shirt and the tie, and then your PJs on the bottom, kind of thing. Yeah,
So my
Lester.
situation is sort of the same, but I have a team of 20 that's spread around the United States. And there's a wide range of age, from new hires to old-timers. That's been with the company for like 24 years. And yeah, we work in the field. We're supposed to work as a team and collaborate, but there's still that element of like competition. And so it makes it tough when you're not together and you're all separate doing your own thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and then so the not being together, which is a similar challenge, like working independently, and then what I also hear you describing, Lester, is like the generation gap and what work means and expectations and how they interact is also.
There's definitely expectations put on each individual. They are sometimes different. That makes it even more difficult.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Well, then you get cultural differences. Half my team sits in India.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, for sure.
Makes it even more challenging.
Yeah, and I wonder, this is really interesting. I hadn't even thought about this, but like non-centralized work groups, like at least you have like my organization's relationships are very heavily emphasized, and the idea of like, well, let's have a one-on-one and let's have a conversation, and it's very kind of let's get together personally. But then that gives you a little bit of a window to be able to have a conversation that's maybe a little bit off organizational script. I don't know where you draw the line when you're working virtually, right? Like, is this a work conversation or a personal conversation? And like how you kind of like squeak it in, and it's interesting that like you're very aware of like all the different, approaches and holistic, approaches that everybody has, and so how do you leverage that same latitude, I guess, to be able to say, here's what my version of that looks like, right? Yeah.
Well, the other thing is you used to put pictures on your desk, and that would sort of draw in the personal relationship.
Yep.
Someone would say, oh, look, you went to Colorado.
Yeah.
There is no desk anymore.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah.
it's kind of funny because on WebEx, some of us put some personal pictures up there, and people were so drawn to that, right? Because, oh, look, we can talk about something personal.
Yeah.
That,
Exactly.
It actually became very distracting, right? Nobody talked about working. But it was just fascinating to see.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
said, oh, look, there's actually humans on the other end.
Exactly. Exactly.
It is
Yeah.
funny though, it seems like we're becoming more and more isolated. Eventually,
Oh, yeah.
we're never gonna have you in contact, we're just gonna do our little nugget of
Yeah.
whatever.
Mm.
Although the trend is switching, at least in my company, we're forcing people back into the office because
Yeah.
they realize that, while financially it makes sense to sell all the office buildings and send everybody home, it was really a bad strategic idea.
Yeah. And
So a lot of companies are forcing people back into the offices,
Yeah.
which over
Def-
time, I think maybe we'll get back to some sense of.
definitely a trend. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
In my case, I work in a mom and pop situation where there's 5 of us, and we all get along, but there's one person who's been there like the entire time with the boss, and she tends to want to be bossy,
Mm-hmm.
and I can take anything, but it does get a little arrogant.
Yeah.
But the way I share my faith at work is I go, hey guys, do you mind if I put my music on?
Mm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
play
Yeah.
my laptop.
Yeah.
And once in a while I'll say, do you guys mind this? No, it's okay. But it's gotten to a point this week where my boss sent me a text saying, hey, you know that song, have you ever heard of Lauren Daigle? And I was like, yes. She said, we gotta listen to You Say on our list. And I'm, really?
Nice. That's awesome.
Just seeping.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder if, and I love that word seeping, because I wonder if what that sharing looks like, it's more personal and it's a gradual thing, instead of just like, I'm putting up my Godspell poster, and like nobody's gonna stop me kind of thing. So so we're going to talk some more about what that looks like. So I love your example that it's just kind of like course of business. We're just listening to some music. That's all it is.
I also take pictures. Like I like the
Yeah.
camera and I like the print. And I brought in, every once in a while I bring in a picture like a cross. You see this cross in the sky today? Like the cloud cross?
Yeah.
Like to show them. And I hang it up behind my desk.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I love that example too. And inevitably, whether or not it's virtual or if you have a physical space, there does seem to be like some little corner of visibility or your space that you can kind of make your own. And so that's an option and an opportunity that's open to all of us. So so I wanted to just, so thank you for your ideas. I think what we're doing is being grounded. I want to be really realistic around what the challenges are, but what makes it difficult. But I want to go back to an idea that I talked about a second ago, which is the idea of understanding our calling and understanding our commission. And the idea that came to me as I was thinking about these questions for me is a couple years ago I went to Haiti for the first time. And if you haven't gone, and if you find yourself called for that, it will change your life. So go if you can. But one of the things, and I was completely new to it and unprepared, even though they do a great job preparing you. And one of the things, the interesting kind of word or language idioms that they talk about was this phrase that they talked about being on mission. Are you on mission? And to me it was so intriguing because this is a missionary organization and they talked about being on mission. And what I began to understand is that they weren't talking about whether or not you were present, but whether or not you are actively and continuously asking God to guide your path. And that idea, and like the idea like missionaries would be thinking about that, and to be conscious of that is just an idea that stuck with me. And I immediately, years ago when I heard it, I was just like, well, that's my opportunity. How can I be on mission? How can I be on mission when I'm at work? And I didn't have any answers come to me, but the question and the challenge and the opportunity of that became really clear. So let's keep going here. And so, yeah, evangelism. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of bristle when I see that, when I hear that word, because I personally have had more negative experiences than positive experiences around this. And I think one of the really cool ways that evangelism to me was described was a couple sessions ago. Was it Tracy that did our first session? Yep. Right? Remember how she kind of described evangelism, being authentic, being your true self in all situations. And because for me, I'm not really influenced or compelled by someone who's, throwing the 3 spiritual laws in front of me and beating me over the head until I, somehow get annoyed and walk away. But somebody who's willing to be able to say, I'm going to be who I am in all situations. And if I'm a follower of Christ, if I'm a child of God, I'm going to try to be that person and be authentic. And I love the way she said it. It's being yourself across a lot of different situations. And so, and I would say that's even including work. So, our slides are frozen. Talk amongst yourselves.
It's frozen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, here's practical practices. So let me share a couple practical practices, and here's where I appreciate our conversation. We're talking about big ideas, and I want to kind of continue to bring it to a point because I'm committed to making sure that we have that one idea that we can walk away with. So just a couple things, and there's nothing magical about these. These are just things that I try to do so that I can be in evangelism mode, if you call it that, but being authentic. And one is self-awareness and self-care. And so what does that mean? And what that means for me is that I'm aware that I have to have a certain level of emotional and spiritual awareness. One of the terms that we oftentimes use in organizations is emotional intelligence. I have to be self-aware enough to know how I'm feeling in the moment. And why is that important? It's important because if I'm going to try to do my calling, if I'm going to try to take the Great Commission at heart, I have to know if I'm walking into work stressful, angry, or fearful, which on any given day, depending upon work life, home life, how the dolphins do, I may, yes. So my burden, and it is a burden. So I have to understand what I'm bringing into work, because here's the reality: I can't give you anything that I don't have. And so for me, what I realize is that I have to get to a place and recenter myself. And I love the examples of music, because that's one of my techniques. So, I don't do it all the time, but every once in a while, I'll just, before I even get into the email, I will just throw in my earbuds and listen to a couple praise songs, because for me, music has that power to kind of reset me and go from a spirit of being anxious or a spirit of being fearful to one of gratitude and to one of being more trusting and having faith in God. But I don't do that. Unless I'm paying attention to what I'm bringing. So I want to be accountable to what I'm bringing into work every day and have a level of awareness around that. Staying alert for ministry opportunities. And so again, this is also about awareness as well, and being alert to what other people are giving you. I think we're all on a journey, and so in the same way that we walk into work and we're just trying to figure this out, and I'm trying to get through today. Other people are trying. I think we forget that other people are trying to do the same thing. Other people are also on the journey. And so trying to be aware of what other people are presenting to you. And sometimes it's in the smallest of comments. Maybe it's just sharing a little bit. Anytime that somebody is vulnerable to you in sharing something with you, that is a moment of vulnerability. And for me, because I am a wicked taskmaster, and I can get in task mode. And so I can be the person that's not paying attention. And so I can hear someone say, well, let me tell you a little bit about my family, or let me tell you a little bit about this. And I can be instead of the authentic, empathizing person, I can be oh, this is a problem you want me to help you solve. All right, well, let's get to it. Let's get down and let's solve the problem. And that's not really what they want. What do they want? Yeah, Yeah, exactly. I don't have to solve it because the reality is that like I'm not authorized and don't have the power to solve it anyways, but I can. I can in the moment listen, and that's the gift that I can give them. So I'm trying to stay aware of those ministry opportunities as they're out there. And then sharing my story because, let me go back here. Sharing my story because, so I talked earlier about relationships. And so just for me, I don't know if it's the same way for you, the most evangelistic, whatever it is that I would get is telling someone what my faith is to me. I'm a lot less likely to be able to say, to walk up and say, are you saved? But I'm a lot more likely to be able to say, you know what? I don't know what your journey has been, but I can tell you for me, my faith is real and it's a part of what I want to do. But here's what I know. I don't share that with people that I don't know. So part of my opportunity and part of my goal is to be very deliberate around building my relationships with people at work. Another idea, just going back to ministry opportunities for a second, just a quick story that one of the ways that I do that, and this is kind of like little technique-y ways, but hey, they work, is I had a pastor back when I was getting married, and he was doing premarital counseling for my wife and I. And anyways, we had to meet him in his office. I had worked with this guy many years and did youth ministry at his church. And so I went to go meet him at his office, and so I went to go sit down in the chair. And in the chair, he had a crucifix. And so, I'm coming around his desk and going to like, well, I'm not sitting on that. I know, I don't know a lot about, sacrilegious stuff, but like, it can't be cool sitting on a crucifix. And I'm sure you just put that there because something, I didn't know why he did it. And so, of course, I had to ask him. And he said, I do that on purpose because everybody who walks into this office, I want to remind myself that God is in them. That God is in them, that they are created by God. And that, it's funny how the smallest metaphors just kind of stick with you. And one of the techniques that I tend to do sometimes, and it's funny, I went back and I saw it on my notes. I'm a note taker, so I have my notepads. At the top of the notepad, if it's a conversation, and I wish I did this all the time, but I don't, if it's going to be a challenging conversation, I'll just put a little cross at the top to remind me that I want to bring God into this conversation, that I want to be an example of what God is in this conversation. And the other thing is, and you'll laugh at this, depending upon how stressful or demanding the conversation is, I'll circle it. And I go back and look at some of my pads, and like some of them have like 8 circles around. I'm like, this person is really challenging me, Lord. Yes. I need to stay very close because it would be so easy to act out and to act for myself and to respond for myself or to respond out of anger or respond out of fear. But I know that you're putting me in front of this person. And so it's just granted, it's a very intentional technique-y way just for me to kind of keep in mind, like, what is this conversation really about solving this little problem or this program that we're doing? Or is it about me being perhaps the only time in this person's day where someone's going to cut them some slack and someone's going to reassure them or someone's going to give them a positive word that they're not going to get otherwise. So what is this opportunity? And again, I'll go back to what you defined earlier. We can absolutely do the career, but if we're doing the calling thing, and if we're thinking about commission and about the Sermon on the Mount, it's just thinking about those opportunities that way. Does that make sense? Okay. So here's just last little question for us. So what comes to mind for you? Is there a technique that you have to kind of stay focused or to stay centered spiritually? Like what do you do? I'm interested. Like what do you do? What works for you? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, when I was younger, it was just practicing being kinder. But as I kind of matured, I realized whoever I work for, I don't work for them. I work for Jesus. Keep my mind on Him and my ultimate employer.
Yeah.
Whatever they do doesn't kind of bother me as much because I listen more.
Right. And that's, I love that example because, and you're taking me back to kind of the conversation about calling. Like, this isn't a job, but like I have an opportunity, and you're seeing it as something much bigger. That's awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think extending your hand in friendship. And I think that's one of the best ways to start off.
Mm. And what does that look like for you? What is your way of doing that? That feels like it's really your way. It's how you would do it.
That's, yeah, by expressing your hand forward of being, there's not going to be clenched fists, there's not going to be verbs, there's not going to, you're just offering your hand.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And I've met many people, and it works.
Yeah.
Hand, I'm telling you.
Absolutely.
Hello, how are you today?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And
it goes a long way.
it does go a long way, and I just have to say what you're reminding me of is some research that I was aware of that just came out about how at work is one of the most loneliest places that we can be. And so there's a tremendous amount of research about how we're working closely together, but it's a environment of loneliness because we're not connecting. And the great example is in the UK, they have a minister of loneliness
Yeah, really.
in their work division.
The other one is,
Yeah,
like this morning, I don't know your name,
Gwen.
but she says good morning.
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah,
Icebreaker.
yeah,
And
yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. And so I think your example is kind of fundamental as it is. We've all been the person who's done the hand, and we've all been the person who's received it. So we don't have to wonder about like, is that good, or do we like that? Who doesn't like that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If you extend it, you'll get the greeting back.
Yeah, exactly. Great example. What other techniques do you have, or things do you have that kind of be centered and kind of like one foot in your kingdom perspective?
Well, this isn't a technique I use, but it's one that I should use. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday who's a coach, life coach kind of thing, and I told him, hey, fix my life while we're here. And apparently I avoid conflict at all costs, but at the same time, I want things to change. And he was sort of pointing out, well, conflict is sort of how things change. If you're avoiding conflict, you're avoiding the engine that drives change. Oh yeah, but like, I feel like partly as a Christian, I want to not be conflictual, and also just personality-wise. But I think no, and in some cases we are called to have a hard conversation with somebody. Well, I think.
Yeah.
But if we want things to change, that's
Yeah.
something that we need to be willing to take part in.
Yeah. And Cliff, it's such a great example of self-awareness, because knowing ourselves, and by the way, I don't think you're alone by any stretch. And so knowing that, like, it's whether or not we want to have that courage and go into our faith to say that all development is about change, and change is sometimes around conflict. I think conflict gets a bad rap. I don't do conflict well, but I know people who do, and I have a lot to learn from them. But that's the beginning of new things, right? Agree, and even if you say, this is the classic, right? Even if we agree to disagree. See that? You can even be disagreeable in an agreeable way. And if that helps you get to the point where, like, okay, we're agreeing we're not in the same place, now we're starting something. Now we're figuring out something new that doesn't exist. But being willing and courageous enough to go into that space, and there's a lot of things that impact our conflict style and how we got here. It's not all by ourselves. It's generational.
You know what I love is I'd love to have like practice time. You know how like when you do karate, like you get caught in a dark alleyway, you're not gonna all of a sudden know how to like do karate on the
Yeah.
guy, right? So
Yeah.
you got to practice. Right?
Yeah.
Is there a practice place where we can like have some conflict? Is it mats around so nobody gets hurt? I don't know, something.
There absolutely is something to that. I think when you learn something new, you have to hear the words coming out of your mouth And there does have to be that safe space. And as a development guy, I'm completely biased because I would say there is that space that you can create, that you can practice, that you can be imperfect about it. And it's just like, learning to ride a bike. You're going to fall over a couple times, so I want to do that practice. And yeah, I still might fall over even after I do it. But yeah, simulations, situations. So practice conflict class at 10 o'clock. If anybody wants to skip church, it's just going to be a lot of yelling and screaming, but it's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Any last ideas? Yeah, Lester.
I was just thinking about that because I think you have to develop that relationship before you can have that space to feel comfortable.
Right.
And to, have that conflict kind of conversation. And so, for certain of my colleagues, we're at different stages in terms of that openness.
Yeah.
In this discussion, if there's a different disagreement.
Yeah.
So you have to develop that.
That's a yeah.
You have to kind of extend it.
Yeah.
And make that happen because it's not going to happen by itself.
Yeah.
It sometimes does.
Yep. Lester, it's such a great observation. You reminded me of something that Chris said last week when one of his principles for integrity was assume positive intentions. And boy, do I forget that sometimes because it can be all about me and my agenda and what I want to get done. And not in a selfish way, but I'm just like 100 mile an hour ahead. Because when we don't have that, when we don't have the relationship, what do we tend to do in conflict? What do we tend to assume? Well, exactly. And we fill that ambiguity with, well, they want to do this, and they're this way, and they're that way. We got the whole psychodrama worked out. We got it all worked out. They landed on their head as a kid, and that's why they're the way they are. And now they're annoying me just for fun. And so if we don't have that relationship, we tend to fill it with not good intentions or expecting or giving people the benefit of the doubt, but something not as good. Well, listen, thank you for sharing your really specific examples. My encouragement to you is to think about ways that God is continuing to call us to be his skin at work and not underestimating even what we think is the smallest opportunity that may have the biggest and most profound impact on folks. So I want to thank you for your time. I'm conscious of time, so can I pray us out and then we'll go to church? Great. Lord, thank you so much for being with us. Definitely felt your spirit, and I want to just thank you for encouraging us to think differently about what situations you're putting us into to be an example for you. And please remind us, Lord, that your hope, your grace, and your love is accessible to us all the time. So give us the smarts and the courage to be able to call on you at all times. In Jesus' name, amen.